This is a production of WKNO Memphis. Production funding for Behind the Headlines is made possible in part by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
A conversation with City Council members about the Klan rally, school funding, and more tonight on Behind the Headlines. I'm Eric Barnes, publisher of the Memphis Daily News. Thanks for joining us. We're joined tonight by Shay Flynn, City Council member. Thank you for joining us again.
Thank you for having me.
Bill Dries, senior reporter with the Memphis Daily News. And Lee Harris, also with the City Council. Thank you for being here.
Sure thing.
Let's start with school funding. And it's, you know, we joked before the show, it's hard for us to do a show without talking about the schools, but there are a couple things on deck from the city's point of view. Let's start with there's funding to MCS that people have talked about maybe happening after July 1, past due bill apparently. I'm not sure exactly the amount, but is that going to happen? It's part of comes out of the lawsuit, and the word on the street is it's not going to happen until MCS is fully dissolved as part of this merger.
Well, one of the things you hear about that, which is completely incorrect, or you read about on the internet, is that the city is somehow playing a waiting game and that once MCS is dissolved, the money goes away. That is incorrect. The Unified School Board would always be the successor in interest in that debt. So that is something that we're going to deal with. There's still the outstanding issue of our counterclaim, which is upwards of $140 million. The judge has opined that we don't have to pay it until that claim is heard. Several times, and I've talked to several members about going in to mediate the claims, all of them, and resolve it totally. I expect that to happen. There has always been resistance on the part of the city school board to having any sort of mediation because they just pretend that our claim doesn't exist, when in fact it does, and it's before the court, and we deserve our day in court as well.
Does that change at all once the merger is gone, though? I mean, do you think that the new school board will be more receptive to mediation?
Some of the people that I've talked to on the new school board are very receptive to mediation. That would be one way to start dealing with it now. Appoint a mediator, get us all in the room, find out that the amount that was originally owed was $57 million. That's ignoring several $1 million in credits that were owed to it. So the amount's actually a little bit less than that. And then it's just working out what the value of our counterclaim is versus the total amount. If all sides can come to an agreement, we can move forward from there. If not, we go to court, we litigate our claim, and we see what happens there. I prefer the mediation approach. I've talked to many different school board members about it. I've talked to Dorsey Hobson when he was their attorney about it, and it just has not come to fruition yet. Does
the appointment of a special master, Rick Masson, which we'll get into later, does that change anything?
Not particularly on that claim.
Okay, Bill.
So my question to you both is, no matter what you call it, whether you call it the settlement from the lawsuit or the judgment from the lawsuit, is there any likelihood that the city of Memphis will be coming up with any kind of funding for the school system that is free of the maintenance of effort requirement after the start of the fiscal year, and should there be?
I hadn't heard any talk about that. I mean, I think Shay Flynn is the point man for school litigation for the city council, and I hadn't heard any talk about that. I think that the city council is I think our budget is pretty stretched thin. I don't anticipate any extra resources. I mean, of course, there's a sales tax proposal which is coming down the pipe, and as part of the sales tax proposal, there will be, you know, if it's approved by both the city council and approval ultimately by the people, there will be some resources there. But other than that, I hadn't heard anything. But again, Shay is the expert on that.
You never say never on this. The issue of whether or not we're going to have any maintenance of effort funds for any future years, we're not. Mm-hmm. That will not continue. Whether there are different mechanisms where there can be amounts given to the schools if the council or the administration and council working together so choose, but it depends on how you define education. If it's just giving money for the school systems for the school board to spend, that is probably pretty unlikely in the near term. But if you're talking about a sales tax in pre-K, relieving some of the burden on some that they spend, that could happen with the will of the voters, or any other future amounts given in-kind service. There's some negotiations with the county about police officers in schools and things like that. So, and then even just after school programs, things that the city can do where, as Mayor Wharton has said many times, education is a bigger system than just the schools. And the city will continue to play a role in education, but we are not going to get trapped with voluntary gifts, which we always maintained our contribution was, hooked into some maintenance of effort, which says it's not a voluntary gift, it's required to be paid in this amount in perpetuity, which I think is a really foolish law. If
the sales tax goes on the ballot and if the voters approve it, that's $27 million in revenue that we're talking about for pre-kindergarten in the city of Memphis. Does that necessarily translate to $27 million that the consolidated school system does not have to come up with?
No, it would not be 27 million, because 23 of that is to gap for about 4,300 students that currently don't have any options for pre-K. Mm-hmm. That would cover them. It would relieve the school system of about $3.5 million that's coming away, and I know they're talking about a $6.4 million number. So yes, it does offer them some relief, but it's not a dollar for dollar relief.
I mentioned the special master, and all the issues of the transition and merger of the school systems. You were in part instrumental in that. I mean, once back in, I guess, in 2008, when the city said we're not going to fund the schools anymore, and starting all those legal battles and so on. Are you happy with where things stand with the transition? And do you feel like this special master is a good direction, or is it kind of a Hail Mary at the last minute to try and save a situation that's got out of control?
No, I think that the special master is a very good decision on the part of the judge to add some pressure just to make decisions. That's where my frustration is that there's been a lot of chatter but no action. And they need to just start deciding. They don't have to decide the way I think they should decide. They don't have to decide the way the TPC thinks they should decide, but they do have to decide, and that is what they have resisted doing all the way. And in that case, I'm disappointed with how the transition has gone. But this is a long-term prospect, and I've likened it before to anyone that's ever run a marathon knows that the worst miles in the marathon are between 13 and 20. That's where you've gone a long way, but you still have so far to go. You're really tired, and it just hurts. It sucks. There's no way around it. And we're in that stage of this. Do I think that it's this doomed for failure thing that the naysayers all say? Absolutely not. I believe in our community. I believe in our ability to take this and improve upon the status quo, which was failing both sides, the county and the city.
And Lee Harris, your take on this? I mean, the city is removed in some ways from schools, but you obviously represent, important parts of Memphis. Schools are an important part of what the government provides. Your take on the direction of the merger of the systems?
Well, I got to tell you, yeah, I've had a mixed feeling about this whole approach that we've taken. I think the litigation's been going on for a long time. I think the legal bills are, have become pretty astronomical, and I've had mixed feelings about it from the beginning. I don't think it's the right move. I think that, I think reasonable people can get together and decide on the future of school children in Memphis without having to resort to, what we've resorted to. And it saddens me. I don't think there's going to be, I think at the end of the day, we're going to get the same result. We're probably going to get some form of autonomy in the municipal school systems, and we're going to get a Shelby County school system. Right. And so all of this effort, as we go along the path to get to where we know we will ultimately be, seems like a lot of wasted effort. And so I am skeptical, to say the least, that we've taken the right approach and that we should be involved in litigation against our municipal.
But is there any, at this point, I mean, we're in the marathon and you almost can't stop, right? I mean, that's one point of view. I mean, what would you do differently if you could, not without going back in time? I mean, from here on out, what would you do differently from the city's point of view?
Well, again, I'm not in control of all the moving pieces here, but as part of the city council, it does upset me a little bit that the city council is involved in litigation. Right. And in particular, we're involved in litigation without a vote of the city council. So I think we may be the only body politically that's involved in litigation and spending lawyers to fight this dispute, but have never voted on it. And so that's strange to me. And I think at the very least, if we're going to be a part of this, we should at least vote as a city council that this is the direction we should go. And we haven't done that yet, so that's a little bit undemocratic to me. And in any event, I think it's probably the wrong approach, and I think it's wasteful of taxpayer money.
Okay.
So there's so much litigation going on here. Let me make sure I'm clear. We're talking about the litigation in federal court. We're not talking about the litigation over the council's decision to cut funding in in state court.
Yeah, we're not. Yeah, we're talking about the litigation related to the action or the most recent action of appointing the special master and so forth. You know, the Hardy Mays litigation. That's the litigation the city council is a part of, and that's litigation that the city council really hadn't taken a formal stand on, at least not by way of a vote. And I don't think the city council, you know, should be a part of that. And in fact, I mean, the city council is out of the school's business, and so it's a strange thing to get out of the school's business and then, you know, take a stand to, you know, participate in litigation to sue. You know, to talk about the direction of the school system. So, you know, it's a bigger, broader debate, but the short of it is, I think that, you know, we should have slowed down and really thought about, you know, our strategic direction. And I think that we may have chosen the wrong path and drawn out this thing unnecessarily. And, you know, litigation is a tool of last resort, and I'm not confident in it here, and I don't think it was the right direction. But I'm just one city council member. I cannot speak for the whole body. I can say we haven't taken a vote on it. That's what I can say.
I mean, let's go to the marathon. I mean, from the city council's point of view, I mean, is there an end in sight to this?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes, there absolutely is. And it's an important distinction is the reason we are involved in it is because we got sued. I mean, the genesis of this.
Well, that's not what the media says, though.
But the genesis the genesis of the federal action was the Shelby County School Board members suing the city council, the school board at the onset to stop the surrender. And all the subsequent litigation has stemmed from that. I mean, you know, we didn't just decide to sue them; they sued us, and then there were counterclaims coming back and forth. So, you know, that's why we're involved.
Suffice it to say, there's room to pull back. I mean, Ken Hoover and the rest of them went to the county commission and asked them to pull back. That enough is enough. I wish they'd come to the city council.
Right. Okay. All right. And let me get your take when we're talking about schools. The funding, the sales tax proposal that 27-ish million would go towards early childhood education. Where do you stand on that?
I think it's real tough to vote against that. I've got some mixed feelings, of course, and I've got mixed feelings just because the voters most recently voted against that. Yeah. And so at some point, you know, the will of the people, popular will, has got to play into your decision making. You got to say, hey, they're against that. Right. But I do love pre-K, and I've spent many years of my life working for a pre-K program in Whitehaven, Goodwill Homes, and so I think it's a great program, and I really think it's a great package the way Shay Flynn and Jim Strickland has put this together. So
and when will
it's going to be a tough vote.
When will it be on the ballot? Is that set?
It's not even set that it will.
It's still got to move through.
On April 2nd, the council will have the third reading, and we will, have our presentation. We hope the con side has their presentation. I think it will have the votes to pass. I think it will go on the ballot, and then that sort of comes up with the election commission. Okay. But we need them to do it. We're looking in late August, early September.
And tell me again the exact amount of a sales tax increase.
The exact amount of the sales tax increase takes it up. Right now, we are currently at a total rate. I won't get into the city-state split, but a total rate of 9.25%. Okay. This would go up to the state maximum of 9.75%, which 48% of the counties, the majority of municipalities in the state of Tennessee are already at. Okay. We're not reinventing the wheel.
Let's stay on taxes for a second. And the property valuation, we're in a reappraisal year every 4 years. Countywide, the details haven't come out yet, I don't think, from the assessor, but it's been pretty clear that it's going to be around a 5% decline in overall values just coming out of the recession, the housing depression, as some people call it, and so on. How is that going to affect budgeting on the property value side? And you've talked before, I think, Shay, when you've been on the show, other people have, about trying to roll back the city tax rate. Is that still doable in an environment where property values are falling?
Well, mechanically, it's absolutely still doable. Politically, it's a much closer call and much higher hurdle. What that represents to the city, I mean, rough numbers here, we get about $310 million from our property tax. So you're looking at about $15 million reduction in revenue that we're going to have for the next year. We're going to have to figure out how to fill that gap. Consequently, we also have about $10 million in increased debt service from some refinancing from a few years ago. So we're going to start off over and above what we spent last year. So we have a $25 million hole that we have to fill. Now, other revenues, sales tax revenues and fees, Councilman Ford and the council increase some of the fees. That might increase revenue to get that down. When you look at what's going on with the emissions, that could be another $3 million. So you get down there, it is a workable number. Where it really puts pressure on is, and I know my colleague, Mr. Harris, and he has a lot of very good ideas for a lot of new programs, and finding money for those on a zero-sum game becomes very difficult because you have to take it from somewhere else.
Well, bring you on that. I mean, you can't tax people to death, but how can you get new programs going? How can you fill the $25 million gap, give or take, that Shay Flynn just talked about?
I think Shay talked about all options. I mean, I think it's going to be really tough. I mean, the one thing I will say that is, as far as I know, the sales tax thing has now been moved to after September. So when the sales tax vote occurs, it'll be way after the tax budgeting season has occurred. In other words, we will know what the picture looks like. We will have already set a tax rate. And so that gives me a little bit more confidence, because my earlier skepticism of this proposal was that we could possibly box ourselves in and kind of, say we're going to cut property tax when we don't have enough money, we don't even know what the tax appraisals are going to be, and so forth. So
what about
it's a
expense
little bit
reductions?
different.
I mean, I know some people out there listening to this say, all we're talking about taxes, all we're talking about is revenue. Hey, if we don't have enough money, we need to cut our spending. That's what we're doing at home right now. Why isn't the city talking about cutting spending?
Oh, we absolutely are. I mean, we just haven't been presented with the budgets yet, so we don't know where we're going to be able to talk about that. But I think this council on a whole has spent 5 years talking about cutting spending. And, that doesn't get a lot of play in the media. That's one of when I talk to public groups, I talk about the myths. People always say, oh, our taxes are always going up. Our taxes have been going down.
That's right.
In
the city the past few years. With the increase in the county taxes, I think it's paramount that at the minimum we hold the line, which we've already talked about the hole we're in. That's going to require some reduction of from the expenditure side. Now, where that is, until we're presented with the budget, it becomes very, very tough. You have to remember that of our $636 million budget, $220 million of it goes to police, $140 million of it goes to fire. Just those two divisions.
Most of that is people, right? I mean, I would assume. I mean, it's mostly salaries and staff.
That's over a third of the people that are make up our 7,000 employee complement. And we have to make sure that people understand that, because they're always like, don't touch public safety, don't touch public safety.
Right.
And we've done a good job of not. I mean, there have been some reductions, but it's never as much as the other services get. But if we had to fund our police and fire on just your property taxes, we couldn't do it. I mean, we'd have a $50 million deficit there. So,
okay. Bill.
Mayor Wharton has talked about making a priority for this coming budget season, restoring the 4.6% pay cut that city employees took. I want to know from each of you how you feel about that. Is that possible given the $25 million hole that you're starting in at the outset?
Sure. So I've been on the council about 14 months now, and I'm ashamed to say that we didn't restore pay cuts, or at least some portion of those pay cuts, last year. So we had a chance to do it last year. We didn't do it. I mean, there are budget difficulties to be sure, but we've got to have our priorities in order. And one of the priorities we've got to have is being respectful and humane to our employees. And we cut their pay arbitrarily, and we cut their pay without warning and without notice. And so we've got to do something to try to restore that pay, at least partially. We've gone through a year, and we should be ashamed to have gone through a year without having a plan in place to tell them exactly what we're going to do going forward. And I don't think we can go through another one. So if the mayor doesn't do it, if the city council doesn't do it, I am pretty confident that Lee Harris will at least say, or put forth some proposal that we've got to at least raise their pay, or at least give them some sort of plan of how we're going to go forward. But I'm hopeful that it'll happen, and the mayor will do it, or
your take on the
it'll happen.
4.6%?
Well, it's unfortunate, but you have to put it in the fuller context. In the prior 2 years, the employees received a 5% raise, and then the next year they received a 3% raise. We've taken back the 5% raise. A lot of this was predicated on the school's decision and the court outcome there, along with the taxes. And so there's been there has been increases. It's not as much, and obviously after 2008, not many people anywhere got raises.
A lot of people lost their jobs.
Saw
cuts in benefits and so on.
From 2009 to 2007, you go back, even adding in the 4.6% reduction, they had a 3.4% increase. That gets lost in the discussion a lot. I've seen the mayor's comments, and generally he talks about a process for it, because the economic realities, unless you're talking about a tax hike, and several council members bemoan the lack of a plan for doing this, bring forward the tax hike that'll pay for it. The 4.6% to all the employees represents $17 million.
Yeah.
So if you add that on top of the 25 million, you're looking at $42 million we got to come up with.
Right.
So
Okay.
you know,
Okay.
if you
But you gotta remember our
can find
employee-
that money,
yeah.
I would love to give the 4.6% back. I don't say it because I don't know how we do it given the economic realities. we're
Last
living in.
word on this, and then we'll move on to.
Well, I was just going to say, just to make sure we're all on the same page here, our employees, we're talking about rank and file employees. Our rank and file employees are not overpaid. Now, if somebody wants to make a presentation that our rank and file employees are overpaid, then this thing's in context, but they're not overpaid. These aren't the high flying employees. I'm against the high flying employees, and they've voted as such.
Okay.
These are the rank and file folks.
Okay. All right. Let's move on. We mentioned the Klan rally, and all this comes out of the park situation. Where does that stand as of this moment? There's some disagreement about how and when and the mechanics of renaming the parks. I'll start with you here. You're on my right. What happens next with renaming these parks? These are all the Confederate War, Nathan Bedford Forrest controversy.
I believe, based on the meeting on Tuesday, that the committee that is established is made up of all sorts of historians are going to start meeting on Monday. I think they have about a 60-day window.
Right.
It might take that long. It might not. Citizens, anyone else can go make a presentation to that committee, what they think the names of the parks should be, why. They will come back with recommendations. The council will vote on those recommendations, either up or down, and we can all move past this.
Right.
And are you good with that process?
I have mixed feelings about committees. I mean, I think that it's not too much to ask to expect your leaders to lead, and I think that this is an issue that the City Council's capable of leading on. But, I'm fine with the committee process as long as the City Council gives the committee some direction. We've got to drive that debate, and we've got to let the committee members know that we expect there to be changes on those names.
Right.
That we don't want the committee to come back with a recommendation of status quo.
Right.
We'll leave these alone. There's got to be reform. There's got to be change. We don't, discretion as to what the name should be, but this committee needs to know for sure from the City Council that we expect there to be some sort of change.
And change in part is just no reference to the Confederate generals, Confederate War. Is that the kind of change you're talking about? Like, we don't want to ground these parks in that history?
Well, I don't know about parks as standards for history. Parks are places where people go and collect and congregate, and people enjoy their public space together. And so we want to come back with names that appreciate the importance of parks in that respect, in that context. That we want people to be able to have birthday parties and cookouts and have no level of discomfort from going to their parks. That's the most important concern. Everything else is secondary. Not that it's not important, but it's secondary to making sure that our public space is accessible, open, and comfortable places for everybody.
Now, speaking of open and comfortable and uncomfortable, the KKK, the Klan is planning a rally sometime soon. Should that go? I mean, it's a free speech issue on some level. I don't know that there's anyone at this table who would be real happy to see the Klan in town, but other people say, well, they have a right to be there. What's your take on that?
I think Shay and I probably agree that I'll speak for myself and let him speak for himself. But I'm hesitant to do anything that's going to hinder free speech. I think the Ku Klux Klan is we don't like what they have to say, and it's vulgar and in a whole lot of ways and hateful speech. But we've got to really we've got to appreciate the First Amendment.
Will there be a counter rally, and would you be part of that? I mean, do you think there'll be counter protesters there?
I don't know. I don't know, but I'm not participating in anything with respect to the KKK. I'm not giving any. No higher profile for that.
Okay. And your take on how best should the city or the citizenry, the government respond to this rally if we assume that they have the right to hold their rally?
They absolutely have a right.
So what's the best response from people in the city and so on?
They have a right to assemble peacefully and put forth their message, however distasteful I might find it. What they don't have a right to do is put on masks and walk around with guns. That is also no. So as long as that part of it is under control, then go. Preach your white power nonsense or whatever. But at the same time, and what I recommend all citizens going to do, I believe the rally's planned for Easter weekend. I'm going to celebrate Easter weekend and
ignore it.
Yeah, they have a right to say it. I have a right to not worry about what these idiots think.
Okay, just a couple minutes left, Bill.
There was some discussion 15 years ago, the last time the Klan was at the courthouse, and the strategy then was to ignore it. And as a result, you had kind of a vacuum among the counter-protest groups that did show up. Is there a danger that might happen again, or is the council working? I know you all have a resolution on this to make sure that the police tactics are laid out in advance on this.
The public safety aspect of it is in the hands of the police director, and I believe he is working very hard on ensuring that. I think, unlike 1998, the permit for the counter proposal has been proposed and it's going through the same process, so it will be a more organized event than 1998. And you've seen that in other cities. I believe Indianapolis has had a Klan rally in the past few years that has employed some strategies that we're looking to and going to utilize.
Let me go. We have just a minute left, and let me go to just you mentioned the emissions. Complete change of gears here. The city is trying to get out of the business of doing auto inspections. Is that going to happen?
Yes,
Okay.
But how that looks is very much up in air. There was a meeting of some suburban mayors, Mayor Luttrell, Mayor Wharton, city officials, state officials, people from the EPA, and the issue is in 2 years they're resetting the standards. So they want to have a pause on the 2 years. The city is firm that we are done being the only people that pay for the air quality in Shelby County.
Just 10 seconds left here. Is there a possibility that in August or whenever after that deadline, there's no one around for a period of time to do city vehicle inspections?
There is a possibility for that, but that's very unlikely.
Yeah, that's not likely at all.
Okay.
The inspection stations will probably be open, but
Okay.
just a question of who pays for them.
All right, we've run out of time. Thank you both for being here. Thank you, Bill, for being here. Thank you for joining us. Join us again next week. Good night.